All right, so that segues us into something that is very important here in Immense Grace. This year, it's been kind of a subtopic, as it always is, which is about business. It's about professionalism. It's about showing up in ways that you know you need to, or taking things to the next level, or creating something that has been kind of knocking on your door and you know that you need to do that, or if you're in a creation process and there's some new ways that you need to start to take it to another level. That's always a conversation we're having. And one of my favorite people who brings such a wealth of knowledge to there's such an intersection of knowledge that you have, Mary Margaret, about kind of how to do this in this era. And so I'm very excited to bring you to talk with me today on this episode of Reality Riffing. Wait, is it Immense Grace? You'll never know. And so I'm very happy that you're here, and also that you're going to be sharing some of your deeper into your wealth of knowledge tomorrow, which is a part of your programming. And you should, if you were planning on leaving early, you should just change your travel plans and stay for the afternoon with Hadi Jivan and Mary Margaret. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I like to call you a headhunter, but I know you don't like it. But I always think of you as Artemis because you're such an Artemis archetype. So but tell them, kind of your background and how you came around here.
I don't mind headhunter. It's not, now everyone's like a talent acquisition specialist, not a recruiter. Like everyone's got that. Yeah. Maybe we should just call it what it is.
I mean, I just like the primal vibe of that.
I'm into it. I think I was reflecting on this, and I think I've always kind of just been a student of human behavior. Maybe because it was so confusing to me from an early age, but. I found school to be very boring, and I always had like my novel behind my science textbook, and I read a lot as a way to kind of escape the boredom of the traditional school system. And that gave me a really wide perspective. I would read anything I could get my hands on. And my mom got me a subscription to the New York Times when I was really young, and I found, and this is something that made me a really effective headhunter later on, and we can all do this, but I was tuned into it, is when I would read these news stories, I was there. I just needed a few details, and it was like intuitively or psychically I could transport myself into this story and just understand, like I'm the policeman and I can understand the stress he's under. I'm the car crash victim, like I could put myself there. And my kind of professional career almost feels, now looking back, designed to put me in a position where I was a fly on the wall in places of power. Mm-hmm. So in college, I interned on Capitol Hill for a senator. After school, I spent 10 years as an executive recruiter or headhunter. And that's somebody, if you're not familiar, who identifies really the next CEO of a big company or a board director. When you hear about a CEO stepping down, either somebody was groomed to take his place, but half the time the board feels we don't have that person internally. We're going to hire a firm to go find that person. And so over the course of 10 years, I worked up the street in Bryant Park, recruiting for Wall Street firms and banks and hedge funds. And then I did the same thing in Silicon Valley. And even from a young age, it was like, oh, we'll let, harmless Mary Margaret sit in the room and take notes. And so like I was
literally... Harmless Mary Margaret.
She's so innocent. It'll be fine. Little did they know I'm like cataloging everything I'm seeing. But then because I worked for a very senior partner, just from a young age, I was very quickly interviewing these executives myself, and it was hilarious because you could see, we'd have people come up from Wall Street, and it was a very intense operation. It was a very secretive, and no one could know, so we'd put them in a little room, and it was like a whole thing. But they'd be expecting, the recruiter to walk in and be like a peer, and I very much considered myself a peer, but I was like a 25-year-old girl in their eyes. So that was really good training to have to kind of elevate that situation and see their skepticism and almost disappointment, but then come at them like, up here. So that was very good training too. But my point is that I just saw a lot, and for whatever reason was in these rooms kind of early on, and I mean really covered the centers of power from politics to banking to technology, and the entire time. From my earliest memory, I can just remember thinking something is wrong. There is something amiss in the way that all of this is happening. And I didn't have any language for it until the teachings of Yogi Bhajan and Kundalini Yoga, because I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I still think the language we have is kind of clumsy. I think in this room we can intuit what it is, whether it's a lack of the feminine principle, which we know that's the case, or just another way we describe it, or could describe it, is we've been living in the third chakra and we need to move into the heart chakra. That's the next phase. But you don't have to subscribe to the new age to realize something's very wrong, and that's been demonstrated obviously over the last couple of years and even couple of days. But yeah, it wasn't until these teachings that I really realized it's what we're really missing.
Yeah.
And so today I have sort of parlayed that, and I work with women one-on-one to help them find the work they're meant to do. And that's not something that can happen overnight for people. A lot of us have to wade through some karmic experiences and just preparatory experiences, which are all, could just be part of the plan. But we have tools for that to make that a lot easier too. So that's what I do today.
Wonderful. And what do you think, particularly, like what language do you feel has been that you found in this kind of these Aquarian age kind of language, these new kind of languages and ways of yoga, how Yogi Bhajan and Hari Jivan and I put things. What was it that resonated with you in terms of the spectrum of experience you've had, and so describe to us now some of the new language you feel.
Well, to put it in perspective, I mean, I walked away from a very lucrative career, and it's because I didn't have these teachings, although it's all going to work out. But what these teachings showed me that I did not have before is an understanding of how you can be in the world that is fundamentally we're not doing the right things to make it work optimally right now, but we still have to be in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I think many of us do this, where we sort of stumble around like, what's the right move? Do I need to work for a nonprofit? Is that the right move? How can I apply my skills? I know I'm very good at this, but I can no longer be a part of it. And we don't have that. There's very much a separation of, I'm either going to feel bad about myself, but I love that, I work for a hedge fund and I make millions of dollars and I kind of feel guilty all the time, but it's great because I have a lot of money. And then the other extreme is the begging bowl, as you described. Mm-hmm. And what Yogi Bhajan and Hari Jivan and Guru Jagat teach is that the whole mission is for us to be in the world and part of the world. Mm-hmm. And that was something that really clicked for me. And that's why I like Yogi Bhajan, because he wasn't saying, he acknowledged that this world is dark. And that was the first time I could connect with a teacher who wasn't saying, if only you would change your attitude or think positive. I mean, he was acknowledging that things were broken, but he also provided a solution and ways for us to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so tell us some of the things that you saw, like give us some details, juicy details. In terms of, obviously you don't have to get like specific of where it was, but, and I think because it's good to put things in perspective. People don't, like I said about this yesterday, like this young woman's getting electric shock therapy in 2018. Like, can you give us, and some of you are, you're working in this world, so this is not going to be a surprise to you, but it's good to just to understand what we're facing in 2020 in terms of
and I love real world examples, and that's why you're a good teacher, because we see it in it's not just theoretical. I would say I respect excellence and discipline. So in many ways I had the coolest job in the world, because I was meeting really the people who had disciplined themselves to become so great in one way, great leaders of huge companies. And I respected them. I saw a lot to admire about people who were very organized, very disciplined, and very professional. And on an individual level, I think when you get most anyone, out to dinner one-on-one, there's humanity there. Mm-hmm. But the general pulse of American business is one of fear and separation. And I think, so if I kind of like divide my experiences, I almost, at least on Wall Street, they're honest that their purpose is to make money. Yeah. Fine. In Silicon Valley, I found more dishonesty, which is we're here to make the world a better place, but we really want to make money at any expense. And I actually think there's been more of a reckoning on Wall Street since the 2008 recession. But of course, I actually worked for financial services clients during the height of Occupy Wall Street. And at the time, I thought they were lazy hippies who refused to get jobs. I had no sympathy for it because I knew a lot of good people in finance, and those were my clients. And I just couldn't believe that an entire industry could be fundamentally corrupt. I couldn't wrap my mind around that. But in the years since, we've heard about Wells Fargo, a trusted consumer bank, making it a regular business practice to open unnecessary accounts for poor and elderly people and just automatically charge them. And that was in the news a few years ago. And then, of course, the largest investment bank and most influential bank and financial institution in the world down the street. One of their 20-year partners defected basically and wrote an op-ed in the New York Times a couple of years ago where he said, listen, this was a place of integrity when I joined, and now I'm sitting in a room with our one-year associates who are 23 years old who are bragging to me about how they've offloaded a terrible financial product to one of our clients. Our clients hire us to advise them on what to invest in, and it's a regular business practice for us to offload those products that we don't want to our unsuspecting clients. And so we have to, as much as it's sometimes painful, I went to school with a lot of people who I still respect and trust who are in this industry, but we've got to just acknowledge you don't have to be a hippie to think there's something wrong with the financial services industry. But by the same token, you should be proud if you do work in that industry because you've got the opportunity to make a huge difference. And so, as you always say, don't quit your day job, meaning, listen, take your skills and experience, and there's so much that you can do. But that's Wall Street. In terms of Silicon Valley, I wish that I could be a little bit more positive about it. It's almost cliche now. All of us have, we understand that these companies aren't acting in our best interest. And
in the sexism in Silicon Valley is just... Yeah. Am I wrong about that?
No,
I've just heard horrible stories of the tech industry sexism.
Yeah. It's rampant, but then we've got the head of, I forget his exact title, but he was the head of, not international relations, maybe of, one of the large tech companies we all use every day. And he just quit and said, listen, I would bring up all the time how we have to have a human rights policy and not work in countries like China and maybe not collaborate with China to create a search engine that's going to, have propaganda and incomplete information, which these companies have been doing for years. So, again, though, listen, if Google comes calling and, and you've got a family, they're going to pay you a lot of money. And there's always a positive polarity. They do take care of their people, and they pay incredibly well. And it's very hard to walk away from that, especially I saw people who were in positions where they would see these things. And I think as part of a large corporation like that, I've obviously been there, we feel like, what are we going to do? We're going to speak up. You might not be able to get fired because of the Me Too movement and because of some consciousness movements, but there are very subtle ways to, not promote you or to sideline you. But what I would say to that is it doesn't have to be so literal. We don't have to be like Superman, like one-on-one revolutionizing these organizations. Your presence alone really does elevate. And it doesn't have to be as literal as, I'm going to fight this fight. I actually think the most effective thing you can do is become so good, so effective, so respected that the CEO is going to come to you and say, hey, what do you think we should do? And this takes time and patience. But the most effective way to revolutionize American business is to be in it and to be really, really good at it. And people are going to turn to you and ask what you think.
Good. Yeah. So let's hit the flip side of that. So now, you've been in the new age scene, and everybody, we're all a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of kind of people who want to, not work and travel all over the world, doing, visiting sacred sites and things like that. But so what's, because I know you're now working with a lot of people from this, this side of the thing. Where do you feel like we're going in terms of new era kind of professionalism and ways to, because I think on that side we throw out some of our ideas, or maybe we never cultivated them, around work ethic or around kind of what it takes to actually create something and what is required. And what are you seeing in this realm of, we'll call it, the new age or yoga and that kind of thing, the yogapreneurs?
Well, I mean, I think you come to the scene from one of two places. Like, you've sort of grown up in the new age, or you've grown up in what is the exact opposite, and you're in a program like Immense Grace or a Kundalini yoga class, and it's such a relief because, especially for people who identify as women, you can actually be a woman in this space. And if you've been in the business world, in a very corporate environment, in Silicon Valley or financial services, you can't. And so it's such a relief. And I think it's fair to bask in that for a little while and to recharge for a little bit. And but I think the overall theme that I see and that I think is of this time is one of integration. And so wherever you came from on that spectrum, or the artist to corporate spectrum, or whatever you want to call it, is perfect. And then it's sort of, it's not moving to some like bland generic middle, but it's cultivating, as you describe it, the agility to move from one to the other. So is Kelly Knight in here? Kelly Knight is someone we know as a very successful businesswoman, and Emily was telling us yesterday how there's so much Capricorn energy right now, and I'm really feeling that, where I'll fall back on the old sort of linear Capricorn masculine tendencies when I'm doing anything in my business, to the point where, if someone's not speaking to me in a linear way, like, it's painful because I'm in the masculine and I'm just like, this is how business is conducted, like, we're serious. And Kelly just reminded me that whenever she's pricing something, she'll pull out a tarot card about it. And I know that sounds simple, but that's like such a perfect example. Why wouldn't you use all your tools? And I don't ever apologize for any new age inclinations. I've never used the term woo-woo because, science is proving a lot of these things now, or it's going to. And I don't have time for it. And I think if you're not using all your tools, and most corporations are not, it's unintelligent and unevolved. And so what I am seeing is, it's interesting. When I went out on my own and said, I'm only going to work with women, I have compassion for every gender, but I want to, I have to put some parameters around this. And I think my skills and experience can be most effective with women. And so that's what I decided to do. But I actually thought it would be a lot more women would come to me from a corporate job and just feeling like, I don't belong. What do? I go to yoga on the weekends, and I see a psychic, and I feel like an alien at the office. And I do work with women like that. But it's been a lot of fun to work with women who are so creative, and I'm so drawn to that, because that's how I was as a kid, and I went to traditional schools, and I let it kind of be stamped out of me, as it happens for a lot of us. And so I really respect women who are just artists in any way, and but I can bring that Capricorn energy, that organization, because that's so critical. And my uncle, who's been a CEO of several companies, he said to me once, in 10 years, you can build anything. Like, if you want to get into journalism, you can become a respected journalist if you stay steady and consistent in 10 years. If you want to do anything, 10 years is not that long.
It's very good advice.
Yeah. But
and very true.
But you have to stay steady and you have to stay consistent. And even down to little things. This sounds so silly, and we've all resisted it, or some of us have embraced it. But, even something like Instagram, it's like, that's just what we're using these days. So you can be super neutral about it, and it doesn't have to be dramatic, but even something like, all right, I'm going to post every day, or I'm going to post every 4 days. Just like, I'm using like a silly example, but you have to stay consistent. And that's what I see with the artists that I work with, is that they create these amazing things, and then there's just no follow through. And it doesn't take much other than, if you even put in an hour a day thinking about your business, like wrapping your mind around your business, one thing I'll do is in the morning is like, all right, in my sadhana, like, what is the one thing I have to do today to move my business forward? If you look at a lot of the women I work with can see the end game. They see what they want to be, and they see, others doing it. They want to be that person. But, and that's helpful. But more important is just putting one foot in front of the other every day. And I think it's what's missing for some people.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm curious, because I have a belief about corporate, let's not just say corporate America, just corporate corporations across the board. I actually feel that there's a lot of enlightenment coming into corporations. And so when people who are in corporate world kind of use that as a way to basically, stop from fully expressing themselves in some way, shape, or form. There was some kid who had found the yoga, and he was the parents were supporting him, and he had sent the parents some a manifesto of I do yoga now, and you can't stop me. And I was like, whoa, calm down. They pay your rent. You know what I mean? So there's ways to do this, but you have to understand who's the giver and the taker in the situation. So if you work somewhere, those people are the givers. I'm not talking on the universal level, but on the environmental level, they're paying your paycheck. They're the givers, right? And most people's problems in general with work, which is a relationship, is they don't understand giver taker. But we could talk about that a little later. But so those people are the givers. So you have to work with them in a certain way, because you have to take and give so you can take more from people who are giving you things. They're giving you a paycheck. You have to learn to give more to them so you can take more. That's basically how you get a promotion, or how in a yogic science kind of way. But I feel like there's a lot of enlightenment coming into corporations, and I feel like that there's actually a lot moving in this realm, just like every other realm. And I'm just curious what you think about this and what you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, well, my boyfriend works for the just most staid, old school accounting firm. It's been around forever. It will be around forever. And they have a mindfulness program, which is the last place I would expect that. And look, I agree with you. Yeah. But then I will also say that I walk into some cubicle farms where I just man, that's a rough place to spend the majority of your life. And the ping pong tables are not the answer, because that's infantilizing. Yeah. And so I don't see, from a physical perspective, that's why I want to work with an architect or interior designer, because I think physically, office spaces, I don't think are promoting, creative thought and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I do, and I think there is, one of my favorite clients was, he had an online, very revolutionary used car online service in Texas. And, he worked with all men, and they're trading online, cars all day, buying used cars. And I called him when I was leaving my last firm, and he was like, Kundalini Yoga. I work with some Buddhist meditation teacher that he works with, and he's the CEO of a used car dealership in Texas. So I agree with you. Yeah, and I think there is still some fear. I think New York actually in some ways has a lot of fear around that. Not in some, obviously there are pockets, but just as an example, when I worked here, I worked at a company that had offices all over the world, and every other office had wireless headsets. We're on the phone all day. We're recruiting people, we're calling people, and you're taking notes. And everyone in the New York office, they were like, no, we're going to have the handset. We've always had the handset. Like that is like new. Like they didn't trust it. Like, but in New York, which
I like those people. I like New Yorkers.
I kind of do
why
too.
should you trust that? I mean, that's weird.
Paperless in 2019, they are not.
Yeah.
I think that, but I think what's behind that.
But do you know, I mean, if you give good phone, there is something, you know, because there's
stance.
something about having like something to hold on to, you know what I mean?
And slamming it down, I think,
Slamming it down. I'm
I
picking
think
it
so.
back up.
I mean, I do, and I have respect for all of that. Like, I mean, in our office, like we still had this is just a few years ago, somebody would come by, they would send an email, hey, the shoe shiner is here. If you want to take your shoes down, I mean, which is hilarious. Like in Los Angeles, we can't imagine that.
I know,
but
that's hilarious. That is hilarious.
I have respect for some of the old school professionalism, but I do. But I think these, what I'm seeing too is some sort of clumsy, admirable, but still sort of clumsy attempts toward like purpose-driven companies. And I think none of us, words are never enough to describe any of this. So we have to fall into cliches sometimes and overused words. But I think the buzzwords are purpose and consciousness and conscious capitalism and all this. And I admire that a lot. And then I think sometimes, and not even the leaders of these organizations, but sometimes people misunderstand that to mean, oh, we have to be nice, you know, and non-profit, and we can't give harsh criticism and that sort of thing. And I've thought a lot about it. Like, what is the vision for a better working world? Like, if I had to distill that down, is it like everyone only has to work 9 to 5 and has great benefits?
Absolutely not.
It's yeah, and it's not. No, it's not. But if I were, you know, I thought about how would I answer that question, and I think it's just a more sophisticated one. I think if you look around, it's just, we're not playing to we're not using all of the cards in our decks, and we see that just in tired corporate policies and that kind of thing. But I agree with you. I think there is a lot of consciousness. I don't think the people have necessarily coalesced and found each other. I think there's still some fear, but I think as millennials and Gen Z move into the workplace more, we're just there in more numbers. It's not that our consciousness hasn't existed before. It's just that we're lucky that we're here in larger numbers.
Well, I also feel like I want to speak to a couple of those things. Yeah, you get, you know, the swing back of this, which is the kind of everything's, you know, whatever, socially forward, and everything's a beanbag, and everything's a, you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, all this kind of stuff. It does become. It feels like the plot line has been lost in some way, or there is less honesty, and also, you know, where did you have to understand like where this cubicle consciousness came from. I mean, this surprises me as an employer from every single time. I mean, they'll tell you I'm constantly going off about it, which is that. I find that people have a hard time with the amount of freedom that I want to give them. And why? Because we have been educated by an educational system, if in America and in other places, you know, I have my opinions about Rudolf Steiner and pre-Nazism, but that people don't like that. But you know, there's some major kind of pedagogical mind control, and in America, the public schooling system was created by Ford, who was looking for people to work in his factory. I mean, that's just, so I think it's, you know, that there's definitely around the world, there's probably some different things happening, but certainly you got to, you know, move pull the string of who created the educational system and why are they educating people this way and what are they trying to create out of a workforce. So then when I am as an employer, I'm trying to create what I wanted to have as an employee, and I get feedback that from my millennial and not as much Gen Z, but my millennial employees, that they basically can't handle the amount of freedom I want to give them. They want someone to tell them, when you have to be in and when you have to leave and what time, what's expected and what's the scope and all this kind of stuff. Now, I do think everyone, so I think this is an interesting conversation as an employer and for someone, I want to create an Aquarian environment. And so this is where I think the conversation becomes more complex and more about what sophisticates us as humans, which then creates more sophisticated places of work. But look at, Leslie was here when during Rama Business School, the story broke around WeWork, douchey douche. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I see a picture of that guy and I just think douche. I mean, I don't know. That's just that's my personal opinion. But so that that was the. And the people who invested in him and who trusted him had bailing him out with that much money and stuff. And that's just like so much irresponsibility in my opinion. So that's a great example of how the thing swings the other way. And so I think there's this new era is really about another level of sophistication. What else would you want to see? Like what do you think is another what's required both as if you're an employer or if you're an employee, like what are we bringing to the table in 2020?
Well, that's so well said. And I see a lot of that too. I've been a manager and that opened my eyes. And finally, all of a sudden, I had so much sympathy for the people who've managed me. I've had amazing bosses and I didn't understand them at the time. And I wasted way too much time complaining about them, not realizing the pressure they were under. Mm-hmm. And you can pay me later. No, but it's true. You become a manager, and I worked for an organization that I respect very much because they were trying and doing the best they could to be very Aquarian as well. And to Gen, what's above me? Gen X?
Gen Y.
Yeah.
X,
it was two Gen Y men who were very evolved, and they were trying they were trying something different, and they gave us a lot of freedom too, and people couldn't handle that either. Yeah. And as a manager, I wanted people to be excellent, and I held them to that. And,
they didn't
people
like
don't
you.
like that very much.
They didn't like you.
Yeah.
They told me.
Yeah. They told me. No. No, it was me. I mean, listen, I think, and my hope out of that experience is that something similar happens like it did with me, which is I am just so grateful for all the times my bosses made me excellent, which they did by having very high standards. And I think that's the best thing you can do as a manager. But to your question, along with the theme of integration, change does have to come from an organizational and governmental level. That's why positive thinking doesn't just change things for people who maybe haven't had as many privileges and strokes of luck. But that's not mutually exclusive with the change that we have to make as individuals. And I don't see as much of that in this room, of course. That's not true. We're all working to become more evolved and more ourselves and more aware. But, there are obvious easy fixes and a new world is imagined. I think back to Yogi Bhajan telling Hari Jeevan, don't worry about your purpose except for today. Like, do what's in front of you. You don't know what the purpose is. And I think that has that's on a macro level as well, which is we can't even envision. We're at like 1% of the possibility for what a working world could look like that, is evolved. And there's still going to be some competition. It's going to be way more collaborative, but it's not just going to be nice and sweet. It's going to be so sophisticated and things we're going to create we cannot begin to understand. But all we can do is what's in front of us. So at an obvious level, it's like, of course, women should be given as much time to bond with their babies as dogs are mandated by law. I mean, these easy things and flexible work schedules. I mean, if you don't have some kind of flexible work schedule, it's like it's the dark ages. But this individual piece, there's so much that we can do. And I think that people believe that if I'm a mother, my orbit is smaller and I can create, I can work on creating these great humans, but those are the only people I'm touching. Or, what am I going to do if I work in for the Los Angeles government? It's so bureaucratic and there's so little I can do. Or what can I do to stave off World War III? And we know as yogis that everything we do has a ripple effect across consciousness. So I'm hopeful that more people will become aware of that every little decision we make, every investment product that we recommend to our clients, I understand the frustration as an executive recruiter. I want to place highly conscious people, but there's a checklist of experiences and the client wants a certain thing. And so sometimes these things aren't as obvious, and it's not like we're like holding the torch in such an obvious way, but we have to, as we're getting more subtle, which Kundalini Yoga helps us to do, we realize that every single piece of it plays a part. And in terms of cubicle consciousness, I was working in San Francisco. I had to move home to Phoenix for personal reasons, but I remained with my company. They didn't have an office in Phoenix, so I got all set up in my dad's office. He had an extra office. He's a lawyer. He's a mediator, and he had people in all day. It was very high stakes mediation and just very tense environment. And I would go in at 9 a.m. every day and like break for lunch. And I woke up one day and I realized I couldn't conceive of a working life outside of a cubicle. So I created the other cubicle, when I had the opportunity for so much more autonomy. And listen, some people do like the discipline. And I know people have gone remote and have said, listen, I really like having an office to go into. So it's about knowing yourself and what you need instead of this one prescribed way to work and live. So I do think liberating ourselves from that cubicle consciousness, but also not letting go of the excellence and discipline that is maybe the positive polarity of cubicle consciousness, if there is one.
Yeah. I mean, something that I say all the time, and I think it's very important when you're looking at your professional goals, and certainly, I would like to, in our next segment, take a look at this personally for ourselves and each other. But when you're looking at this kind of stuff, you really have to be in a self-confrontation about how did you show up to your first job? What kind of babysitter were you? What kind of waitress were you? What kind of, retail when you worked at the Gap or you worked at how'd you show up? Because that pattern is how you work today. And that's why when people tell me that they behave a certain way at a job that they don't like because they don't like it, I don't believe them. How you work is how you work. And I'll tell you another thing. How you work is how you play. And how you work is how you love. So these things in Yogi Bhajan, in ancient cultures, work is sacred, work is holy, and no work is better than other work. And that's why I appreciate going to other cultures, because you go certain places and they have certain kind of things set up in a way that you see people doing jobs that maybe in America you wouldn't see that particular archetype of a person doing that particular archetype of a job, and certainly not happily. And you see that and you're like, oh, there's something going on here where the society has in it, there's a little bit more of work is holy, or is something's going on here where we're happier about, or we see that work maybe it's because of healthcare or something, or, something like that. In Europe, when our European employees, I was teasing them on our global call. I was like, and you guys, I have to give you like 6 weeks of vacation every year. I don't even want to talk to you, but so that maybe it's because of these things, but I don't think it's across the board. I think it's it's certainly about a sophistication, but you see that, so you get a little bit of a different perspective. But work is holy. It's part of it. It's a sacred thing, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, and how you do one thing is how you do everything. So just as a point of reference for looking at the kind of holographic universe, I think that's a big part of sophistication. That even if you're in the job that you hate more than you've ever hated, or your boss that you don't like, or some other kind of workplace dynamic that's really upsetting you and that kind of thing, this is very much a place where you can burn a lot of karma. Yogi Bhajan was really into work as a karma burning mechanism. It's an evolutionary mechanism.
Yeah, and listen, there's nothing worse than being in a job that is not a fit to whatever the highest thing you're going to do. I have a lot of respect if you're in that, but you're exactly right. I mean, if you can just really lean into that and be able act so that later you can look back and say, I handled that situation with grace. Not only the karma burning, but just the grit and the muscle. If you can face that, because it's real, it's, there are situations that are painful if it's not right. But the only way out, as you always say, is to face it, to do what's in front of you. And I work with a lot of people who are, firing off resumes and job applications and just so desperate to get to the next thing. And, there's no question. Sometimes it's time and you'll know, but the goal and why we're all in this room is you really do have to be aware of when it's, no, this is a situation where I can actually learn to work with different difficult personalities or, whatever it is, or no, I've graduated and it is time to move on. But that's what this practice gives us. And that's why it's so critical to modern business.
Yeah. I do think that one way you're growing as a human is that you aren't just hanging out with or tolerating people who are like you. So that's why work is a great place to have an opportunity to have to rub with people who aren't like you, who you have to deal with in one way or another. And then also, I think more and more we're seeing kind of the creation. I mean, certainly within the 7 years of Rama Institute for Applied Yogic Science and Technology, we now have thousands and thousands of businesses born from this intersection of what we've created through the world. So we're very proud of that. However, I always tell people not to quit their day job, and there's a reason for that, because it's good to have to rub with people who that aren't necessarily like you or don't have the same beliefs as you, or politically, economically, and otherwise. It's good to have to deal with those people. It makes you mature.
Yeah, and some people, look, the best thing you can do is go start your own business and do your own thing. And when we have talent that's not going to work for some of these evil companies, I mean, it's a great way to starve them for talent, is to go do something else and start your own thing. But it's just as valid and just as important for some of us to work within those organizations.
Yeah. And are you seeing placement of more female CEOs?
I am. Yeah, I think, Jennifer Hyman, the CEO of Rent the Runway, said this really well, because she had some run-ins, with sexual harassment. And she was saying, listen, I think we are getting to the point where that still happens, but it's not openly accepted. There are consequences now, and it's not perfect, but we're in the consciousness, and we've made great strides where that's not just like an open practice. But the subtle ways that we are all still a little bit sexist still exist. And so from her perspective, she worked with a private equity firm that had a whole portfolio of companies, and she was the only female CEO of one of these portfolio companies. And the private equity investors were saying, hey, Jennifer, you should go meet with some of these other portfolio company CEOs because they'll have a lot to teach you. But she said they never told the male CEOs that they should meet with me, even though now I have the most successful company in the portfolio. So I am seeing it. I think maybe even 5 years ago, it was the board of directors would come to us, and it was kind of like, all right, we've got to have like 30% women. And so if you can bring us a slate of women, that'd be great. We have to do it. I mean, the things I heard, and they'd go through the interview and whatever. But I actually think now, and it's both fortunate and unfortunate, but I do think there is evaluation based on merits. But we've got to start earlier, because now there really aren't as many, there aren't as many people who have the exact same merits on paper. And I think it's cool when boards take a risk and they'll put a young female CEO on their board when maybe they wouldn't have done that, if it was a male CEO. So we are seeing some of that, but that's why we need Rama University and elementary school, because it has to start earlier.
Yeah. Should we take, anybody have any burning questions that you want to ask Mary Margaret? She's gonna do some teaching tomorrow, so we're gonna go deeper in some of her, for lack of a better word, executive coaching. Yes, let's get a microphone down here. Right here, love.
wanted to get your thoughts on. This is like just so great and inspiring, by the way.
I'm glad.
I really wanted to get. I'm a musician, performer. I'm my own boss, and I work in the music industry. What are your thoughts on like that other industry, like music and fashion, and navigating that as your own boss person?
Yeah.
Boss person?
Yeah. Well, first of all, on just a broader level, I think those, if you're in those industries, you have an important mission as well, because pop culture is how,
Yeah.
I was just at we took my boyfriend's nephews to an indoor trampoline park, which, by the way, is pretty cool. It's great
so
for your lymphatic
fun.
system.
I
But
love
anyways,
trampolines.
where am I going with this? So they're playing like heavy rap music, but like for 5-year-olds. Like it was really wild. It was really intense. Like and just, like not bleeping anything out or anything. And so that's the programming. And so I think if you're in the music industry, I mean, you have such an opportunity, and it's so critical and so important. And I've worked with musicians, and I worked with a very talented musician who's frustrated because she's kind of had to hold the pose. And she's been in the industry for a very long time. She's been working hard. And, she said sometimes I get on stage and there are like 2 people there. And what we talked about is just how it is about the outcome, but it's also not about the outcome, in that she has a vibration, especially through her Kundalini yoga practice, and it comes out when she sings. And it's like, I mean, sometimes these things, I can put myself in like the mind of the patriarchy, like hearing this, and it sounds ridiculous, but that is the kind of thing that staves off World War III, which is having that, that vibration coming out of you into the world. The medical medium, Anthony William, he talks to people who are recovering from chronic illness, and he talks about creativity and how, the angels are reading your poem and they're listening to your song, and you're not doing it for anything other than to add creativity to the world. And it's critically important. But then of course you have to earn a living, and that's where this discipline comes in. And I think in times past, there's been so much separation, and the artists have been starving, and then they've got the benefactors who pay for them, and you've got to be lucky enough to have a benefactor, and that was like the medieval through today model. But now you have to be integrated, and you have to be a businesswoman too. And it's hard because it's like, it seems like even more responsibility, but it's also much more streamlined. It's never been easier to start a business.
Yeah.
You need like somebody to take your picture in an Instagram account, and maybe you form an LLC, but like you can
Photoshop.
Yeah. So in some ways we're being asked to do so much more. You've got to be a model and a photographer, all these things, but in other ways it's never been easier. So I think the challenge for an artist today is to integrate that business side to them, and it doesn't have to look like it did in the past where you have to hire all these, at the right time you will, but in the beginning, you can be all those things in a very efficient way, in a couple hours a day, but it's steadiness and consistency.
I'll tell you something. You probably don't know who this is, but there was a musician called Frank Zappa. Do you know who this is?
I'm 38.
Oh, really? Work. I thought you were like 19 and a half. But okay, great. All right, hi. Elder millennial over there. I was going over to their house, and it was many years after Frank had passed, and I was going over there and working with the family for a while in Los Angeles, and they kept his studio exactly how it was when he was alive. But I don't think they go in there very much, but you would pass the studio to go to the main house. And when I walked in there, I knew a lot about Frank Zappa, because I'm a fan, but when I walked in there, I was hit by this energy field of the studio, because and it was very noticeable, because the way he dealt with his musicians at the time, this was very unusual. They worked 40-hour work weeks even when they weren't on tour, and he required sobriety out of them, which at the time, nobody would believe that Frank Zappa was sober too, because who hasn't tripped to Frank Zappa Mothers of Invention album? All of you have, right? But so you wouldn't believe that he was sober too. But he had that kind of like level of work ethic. He ran the thing like a hardcore businessman at a time where that was really not the way that musicians like him did, and you could feel the aura of that. And then now, obviously I know a lot of successful musicians, and every single one of those people have that kind of work ethic. That's the aura that they're carrying. And it's hard, it's heavy. It was actually something I found interesting in my little study of backstage at the Grammys last year. I was studying everybody's aura, and these people, they have hardcore work ethic moving through the aura. From Jennifer Lopez, Drake's is like really intense. Really like bowl you over, kind of the level of like the focus that the whatever's running him has. That thing is really, really intense, as well as the spectrum. Dolly Parton has that crazy. She really, that is a hardworking whatever she is, and so but that I think as an artist, there's ideas. A lot of artists, it's like inspiration or something, but the work ethic has to be like a very high level to be able to. So I'm just sharing that piece, that there's nobody I know who in any sector, but certainly in the arts, who is a successful artist, who's also been able to either learn or already had the kind of innate know-how of being a business person as well, that doesn't have some of the aura of just a hardcore work ethic. So, and you're 38, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? So that's I would just say that like every piece of the way that a corporate exec has to show up has to be the way you show up as an artist. All the positive qualities. And I take that very seriously. And all the, the great writers, except for, but even like a Hunter S. Thompson, who was fucked up all the time. That guy wrote prolifically. And he said that when he had writer's block, what he would do, and Tegnon bought me one of these typewriters as a gift. He would take, he'd take a bunch of LSD and, smoke a bunch of crack or whatever. I don't know what he was doing. And drink about, party all night in Aspen. And then he would, at about 4 a.m., sadhana, he would sit down, and if he was having writer's block, he would take a great work of another artist like James Joyce or whatever, and he would type it on his computer. On his typewriter. And he said that what it was for him was the sound of the typewriter that would inspire his new work. But dude was prolific, and then he got into politics, and he was just, and if you've ever written or if you've ever read the letter he wrote Nixon, it's, the mind on that guy, it's like even with all the brain cells that were being killed. But so all these prolific artists, I cannot point to one of them, including Billie Eilish, who doesn't have that kind of work ethic. So just, making my point on that. It's a big, I have a huge thing. And if you're working for yourself, you have to you're creating a caliber of work ethic that you have to show up for. That's a crying age. And even if you're working for someone else, you're creating that work ethic caliber, because then if you don't want to work for them anymore, that work ethic caliber is monumental in the magnetic field of drawing in a better opportunity.
Yes.
Well, maybe one more question, and then we can take. I wanted to Jessica. I think we would love to hear a question from Jessica, who's repping the robotic disaster very well back there.
Thank you. I love it.
Thank you. That's my handwriting.
It's so rad.
Thanks.
The message, the handwriting, everything.
Thank you. I'm gonna do T-shirts with my poem, my haiku, like human haikus is what I'm gonna call them.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
I work for big tech as my day job, and I have a really great job. I genuinely love many aspects of it, And I know that my time there isn't done. I have a ton of freedom, but I'm also held to very high standards, both in terms of like professional caliber and opportunity and like delivery and impact. So I expend a tremendous amount of energy towards my work and towards my job, and have been doing that for 3 years. But the time is also on me now to bring my mission and my work in the world, and start other projects. So I'm in this in-between where I have feet in both worlds, and I can see that I'm in this position for the foreseeable future, however long that may be. So my question is specifically, or what I'm grappling with, is structuring my work between my job and the work that I want to put out in the world, so that the structure and managing that, and managing my energy, and directing my energy to kind of do both justice, which is just a lot of energy I need to expend.
Can you say anything about the other work?
Yeah, I am starting a universal political movement. So I want to start a movement and a campaign to empower individuals to reclaim their political power and responsibility, and to reconnect to their impact on the whole. So a movement that really transcends borders and transcends political ideology, that everybody's a part of, just inherently being a human. You have political sovereignty and political impact and responsibility. So that's what I need to start putting out in the world in a more serious, concrete, tangible way.
Casual.
Right.
Super casual.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go through this, and you do have this situation where I'm sure they pay enough so that you can explore these other things, so that you can be here, which is no small thing. And you're also not only, I'm sure, having an elevating impact, but you're also learning things that you don't even know how valuable everything that you're learning is going to be, and directly applicable, even if it doesn't seem like that, to your side project. And this is one of those day-by-day things where if you try to plan this out, you're going to be manipulating the situation and controlling it, and that's not necessary, because you never know how these things are going to grow together either, seemingly disparate as they are. And so it is a day-by-day thing. What do I need to get done today? And rather than being a source of stress, I believe the only way to happiness is to actually be busy and productive with things that you care about. And so your time and day is going to expand. And also, we're becoming so much more efficient, where even 10 years ago, this may have been a kind of thing where you're staying up till 4 a.m. working on your side project. And I think we're getting so much smarter and so much more efficient that this is going to be, a lot of it is going to be, getting right with your practice and staying calm and being the channel and the vessel, and working with whoever it is, your higher self, whatever, like getting really clear, because you can't afford to lose energy on the things that don't matter. And so it's taking a look at your day job and the ways, and maybe hopefully by now they're subtle, because it seems like you have it under control, it's working for you. But every little thing that you're wasting time on, even if it's things with friends or family obligations, like everything you do is going to have, the question to yourself is going to be, is this in alignment with what I need to get done today? Or is this, is it in alignment with my mission? And so your whole day is going to be sort of, every day is going to be different, but you're going to have a lot to do, and I think it's going to make you really efficient. It's going to be really good training to have the two things going at the same time.
And then you wake up and you're 40 and you have a lot of gray hair. Okay, Satnam. Or 60. No, but you get gray hair from this stuff. That's part of the thing. It's a pressure, right? So you gotta work it out. We have the cat cow, so that's good. But no, it's like, what else are you gonna spend your day doing? What else are you gonna spend your time doing? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Is there's a lot of time you're spending that's not directly related to the things that you want to do. Even if you have a 9 to whatever, or however you describe those types of jobs, that the certain type of having to show up at a certain time kind of job, there's still a lot of time that you have during the day. And then, you know, some of you who have one of those jobs and have children, then you like have to start to look at like, all right, I'm raising a child and I have a full-time job. There are things I also want to do besides those two things. That's when we're really that's critical mass. Anybody in that position in here? Yeah, I mean, you guys are the saints in here, because that's really, so for those of you who, you know, Jessica, it's like you don't have children right now, so you got to put the pedal to the metal, because once you know you have the children and these other things, that makes it's especially young children, but still, I mean, they need you. So I think that's when things are, you really have to grab that it's a precious, then that kind of, we'll call it pressure of physical motherhood, having a physical child and having a certain kind of career and other visionary kind of goals. That's what makes you an alchemist, because you literally have to create time.
Yes.
Out of nothing. You know, so bless you all who are doing that. Let's give the mothers a round of applause. And then, but on top of it, you know, I know some of you are single mothers. That's just a whole nother level and that's why, you know, single mothers tend to be just the strongest human beings on the planet. That really, you know, that's real, and some of us have the great fortune of having mothers like that who, you know, we're just complete alchemists. Mary Margaret, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And so how can people find you?
On my website, which is marymargaretskelly.com.
And she has a lot of really, really good photos.
Thank you. Thank you. There are a lot of very good photographers in this community.
There are, actually.
And then on Instagram, it's just my name, Mary Margaret Skelly.
And Mary Margaret is doing a really interesting series called The Archetypal Woman or Women.
Archetypal Woman series, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where she's interviewing a lot of amazing women and putting their stories out there. I love that you're doing that. And then tomorrow, what are you going to be focusing on tomorrow?
Yeah, from tomorrow, if you can stick around from 2:30 to 4, we're going to be talking about leadership in this unprecedented age and the new principles of success in a heart-centered age. We're in a totally different era, and leadership looks a lot different, and we're just at the beginning of figuring out what that looks like, but I do have some ideas, so hopefully you can stay.
Amazing. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.